From the casual to the most competitive gamer, when you are getting into a new game and you're hoping to do your best, the first thing you always need to check is your settings. Today, I'm bringing you some of the best settings for Call of Duty Warzone, and also known as Call of Duty Warzone 2.0. Today, we're going to take a look at a beautiful controller that I use to dominate the game every day, and that is my Thrustmaster eSwap Pro XR. I'm going to go over not only the best settings for you inside of Warzone, but some of the best settings you can go through and adjust on the actual Thrustmaster app itself so that you can have that stuff preloaded and ready to go for whenever you change games as well. Obviously, these settings are going to be what I find to be most useful for me. Feel free to go through and tweak things as you get accustomed to the game and you find things that may work better for you. So I'm starting off here with the horizontal stick sensitivity at 5 and 5. I've played all the way down to 3, and I've played all the way up to 17 in this game. And I find the absolute sweet spot between 5 and 9. I am currently playing at 5 to give myself a little bit more control over range while still having a good turn speed up close. If you are finding yourself to be a very aggressive gamer and you want to be up on top of people, you can sit as high as probably 9 and still find a lot of success. But if you want to be able to land those long shots like I'm notorious for while still maintaining good close combat, the 5 and 5 is one of the best. And here's one of the big things that a lot of new players miss that I think you should really take advantage of, and that is the ADS sensitivity multiplier. This right here is actually a change in your sensitivity based on whether you're hip firing or aiming down sight. The 0.85 is actually a negative multiplier, meaning that when you ADS, your sensitivity gets lower. So this is going to reduce your sensitivity by 15%, or the 1.5 from 1 to 0.85. This goes through all of the settings. So you're looking generally between 0.8 and 0.9, so I'm sitting at 0.85 right there in the middle, right in the sweet spot, to give yourself a little bit of slowdown when you're ADSing, but still maintaining the good turn speed when you're not. You can go through and actually actively adjust each one of these sensitivities by themselves, but I find a 0.85 actually works for all ranges for all the different scopes. One of the big things that I think is very important for me is the aim down sight behavior is hold. One of the best changes they've actually added most recently is the change zoom share behavior. If you've ever used a hybrid scope in a Call of Duty game, then you know that whenever you have it on the joystick, you can't actually focus breath like you normally could, or hold your breath like you could for the snipers. If you have a toggle, it would continuously just swap scopes. You can now actually change that, and I recommend doing so. Changing your zoom to the actual melee key means that you'll no longer have to swap it if you run in what I do, which is the tactical setup. Now, if you are using the normal setup, then this will actually start off as sprint, tech fire, and focus all in one. But still, swapping to melee will help you a ton. Focus behavior is on hold because that lets you start and stop it as you please. And then turning off automatic sprint, because in Call of Duty Warzone, the tactical sprint being automatically on actually reduces the speed in which you can ADS in combat. And so by turning it off, what you end up with is a little bit more control over when you're sprinting, and therefore you get faster ADS speed times. Equipment behavior to hold, which allows you to walk around with them out. Things like this also allows you to do what I do and really make a lot of people mad, which is using the throwing knives and walking around with them out. So that way, as soon as you run into somebody, you can throw it and no longer have to actually cue it from your pocket to throw it. It means faster times for throwing knives and faster wins. Weapon mount activation, ADS, and melee. I like this just because it means you don't accidentally mount up onto a wall. This is a super useful thing for long shots, but obviously up close you generally are going to try to avoid doing so. An amazing thing that a lot of people who are new to controller need to realize they can do, and a lot of people don't, is prioritize interact. If you've ever played on keyboard and mouse, everybody will tell you, oh man, looting is so much faster on keyboard and mouse. Well, that's generally because they've never changed this setting. If you set it to prioritize interact, you will always work on looting first and then reloading or opening or closing doors second. So this is going to allow you to be able to do all the stuff you need to do for looting without continuously swapping or trying to reload by accident or running into a lot of issues of having to hold to actually have to grab stuff. This is probably the most important for early game and late game because it actually directly affects how quickly you can get in and out of combat while still interacting with items around you that could save you in a very, very hectic fight. Armor plates go to apply all. You can always cancel them, but if you have to continuously attempt to place one plate in at a time, that is actually a slower system than if you just start applying all and then canceling at any given time. For me, I would cancel with Y on the amazing Thrustmaster eSwap Pro XR, but obviously if you have different control settings, it could be based on whatever works best for you. I have here what is called tactical flip, which allows me to actually utilize a different button layout. When you deal with bumpers on the top, generally speaking, a lot of that is a lot faster. We do have the trigger stops and the shortened stroke and a lot of like customization for triggers on the back. But for me, as a claw player, I have grown to be exceptionally comfortable utilizing both the bumpers on the top for aiming and firing, while still being able to reach down with the top of my finger to do all of my claw maneuvers as well, and allows me to set with my middle fingers to the bumpers as well to do more as I'm clawing. So if you are a person who is also a claw player like myself, who's been doing this for a really long time, you can find that tactical flip with bumpers as your favorites can be very, very nice and can make for very, very good combat situations. It also will make you be able to fire things like burst and semi-auto significantly faster if that is your style of gameplay. Once we start getting into the advanced settings on Warzone, the aim assist type is default. There are a lot of different types, and people can argue for Black Ops, but realistically, when you're just starting out in the game, default is pretty much the standard. Aim assist response curve dynamic. Dynamic is really nice for anybody who is relatively new or is looking to get the most out of their adjustments. Dynamic makes a reverse S-curve, meaning the closer movements are faster and the further movements are slower. For most players that are new, you're going to be able to make faster movements with your stick moving just a little bit. But if you happen to push your stick all the way to the edge, you're going to be less likely to overcompensate or over-aim. Over-aiming is probably one of the most consistent things I've seen when people are new starting in a Call of Duty game. And so dynamic helps prevent that because you get less motion to the outside of your radius. Super great. This is the 0.85 again. This is the exact same style. This is for focus, which means whenever you hold your breath, it will actually drop your multiplier even further. Again, another one at 0.85. This will be just helpful to manage to be able to control it even more over range. You can go through, if you are that kind of person, and go through and actually set each individual settings. But again, consistency is key. So anytime that you have something like this, unless you are just one of those people that needs to fine-tune everything, keeping consistent numbers and keeping it simple will make your life significantly easier. Now let's get into dead zones. I use pretty low dead zones. Left stick min and right stick min, 0.01. And that's something you can get away with when you're using a really nice controller. Don't get me wrong, default controllers that you get with your systems can be good. But if you're really trying to get the most out of what you do, you really need to consider buying yourself something nice. There is everything from the eSwap Pro S all the way up to the X and XR. And I love the customization of the XR and the X. So that is why I'm rocking that here for you today. And then when we get to the max, this is 0.95. These dead zones, essentially enough, act as a way of telling your controller of how far it has to move before it starts putting on the inputs. For me, I love fine motor control. So I always want the least amount of movement necessary before the game actually starts predicting and picking up my movement, which allows me to feel like I'm in control all the time. But if you find yourself to be a person who overcompensates on your shots again, sometimes setting them a little bit higher is nice. But I recommend starting as low as possible to get the most snappy and most responsive feeling aim for you inside the game. When you get to the maximum on the dead zone, that is how far you have to actually push the stick across before it finds itself at the maximum input. So if you need to be able to reach maximum speed at the fastest position, you can drop this all the way to 0.7, 0.75. That means you only have to push your stick 3/4 of the way to the edge to actually get to maximum input. I again love fine motor control, so I actually like to put mine to 0.95, so that way I have a large range between my smallest movements and my largest movements. And on joysticks, that means that you have a lot of control, which means you can actually learn and experience a lot more consistency across your gameplay as you continue to do so, because there's more room for you to make fine adjustments. Trigger adjustments, these are set really low because I really want as instant of a trigger pull as possible. So you can set these all the way down. I'm putting mine at 0.1, which means I just have to barely pull the trigger before it actually will initiate whatever I'm doing. And then I just have to barely let go. And it allows me for really fast follow-up shots, or if I'm using it for my tacticals or my lethals like I am right now, these are just really fast action. And it allows for a very responsive time. I like to also keep off anything like grounded mantle, automatic airborne mantle, anything that is automatic, I generally avoid because I want to be in as much control of my gameplay as possible. If you are a slider, leave it on standard. If you are a diver, put it to inverted. I am a slider. I like having my slide to be able to move in. Other people like to be able to belly flop whenever possible. Just put it to inverted. I'm going to keep it with standard, especially with Modern Warfare 3 coming out soon and the returning of slide canceling. You're going to see the standard be a far more used setting before too long. Now that we've looked at the controller settings in-game, let's look at the controller settings we can do out of game to keep you prepared for any new title you may actually pick up. Just in case, you want to try something new or you have other things that you'd like to play, this is the Thrustmaster eSWAT Pro app. You can get a hold of this on your Windows device or on your Xbox, and this allows you to actually go through and program up to 2 separate profiles, say one for Call of Duty and one for Forza, so that you can drive and you can run around and bang bang on the same controller. The first thing up is it will show you what your setup is in the main screen, and it'll actually tell you what you have it assigned to in the back and all of that fun stuff. You can go through and make yourself presets, or if you just want to help a friend, you can import a preset and send it out to them for when they get their eSWAT Pro as well. Now let's look over at the mapping. Things like the rear buttons, very easy to press and very reliable, can be assigned to anything that you want. I have mine as the right stick, A, Y, and B, but of course you can run anything that you need for these back buttons and of course, customize them as needed. But that also goes to be the same for all of your forward-facing buttons, your joysticks, and your sticks, and your bumpers, and all of the sort. You can go through and reprogram all of those as well. So that means that you can completely customize this controller, not to just how you're supposed to be playing, but how it works best for you, your hands, and your play style. Let's look at our mini sticks. This is your dead zone. We talked about the dead zones in the Call of Duty section, but this is one actually built straight into your controller. So you can actually go through and set your sensitivity curve. So this is not only the dead zones, but the actual sensitivity curve inside Call of Duty as well. So if you are the kind of person that needs that reverse S curve that isn't available for other titles, you can build that actually straight into this. Leave all your settings in games as default and go through and do it here so that every time you reach a new game, you always have the same setup. Again, we have minimal dead zone setups over here for me. And then I have a linear curve here because mostly I play Call of Duty on my controller. But if I was not playing Call of Duty and did not have these options, I could easily go through and make my adjustments on this setting right here to make for exactly whatever I need on any game at any time. Again, on triggers, whenever you get to over here, you can actually adjust. These are your dead zones essentially enough on your triggers, how much and how little you need to press to activate the triggers, and how much you need to let go before it reactivates again. These are really nice, especially if you are the kind of person that likes to have a really snappy trigger, or if you're a racing person who needs to have access to the entire length of the trigger. These are very important as well, as it gives you a better control over your throttle and brake. And then here is one of the final things, something that a lot of people don't actually realize they may actually need control over, and that is vibration settings. Whenever you're playing a shooter or a racing game, sometimes that haptic feedback, the vibration itself, can be very telling of what's going on around you. Sometimes you need to be able to actually feel that feedback on a controller so that you know whether you're in combat or you're starting to veer a little bit too far off the road. Well, here from the eSwap app, you can actually control how intense the vibration is. In a shooter, also, one of the big things is you don't want to vibrate yourself off target. So for me, I'm running at 50% vibration, but you could go as low as 10-15% vibration, still get the feedback of understanding where combat's happening, but also not shake your controller out of your hand while you're doing so. It's the little things like this that separate a default controller from a exceptionally nice and well-crafted controller. And it's one of the reasons why I have chose to work with eSwap and the Thrustmaster brand, because I love the way that I have the customization to build the controller and run the controller how I need, rather than just some default settings that someone throws at me over the counter. Now, to show the controller in action, I've got for you a round of Vondel with my buddy Mugs TV. We're going to be running the crossbow on Vondel for a win and an amazing set of gameplay here. So if you play Call of Duty Warzone, you know the crossbow is unforgiving and one of the most aim-reliant weapons that we currently have for the game. If you try my settings, I'd love to hear how they're working out for you. And if there's something you think I missed, let me know, and I'd love to cover it for you in future videos as well. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show, and peace.
Got a hostile here. Moving here. Enemy marked. Safe zone relocated. Hostile dropping into the... Your team has entered the safe zone.
Requesting close air! Hostile destroyed!
Be advised, you have teammates outside the safe zone.
Enemy marked!
You've made it to the top 10.
Moving! Enemy here! Marking enemy! Clean.
Got a hostile here. Gas is moving in. New safe zone located.
Enemy visual!